So my name is James Ong. I'll be the moderator for today. We have three distinguished speakers on the topic of harnessing AI for sustainable supply chain finance. But before I start introducing all my speakers, today is a very important day. There's a US election that's happening. And I was thinking about the topic today, harnessing AI for supply chain finance, right? I want to show you a couple of questions. You know how much money are spent in the US election to the whole supply chains of financing? It's close to $15 billion with 10,000 political groups involved in doing the whole supply chain or influencing the impact. So I think you can imagine the power of financing in affecting our future, right? So as such, very glad to have three speakers. I'm going to let each speaker kind of introduce yourself and then share your position on this topic today, right? Maybe Sabrina, we start with you first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Sabrina. I'm the Chief Sustainable Business Officer at BNP Paribas Corporate and Institutional Banking in Asia Pacific. So BNP Paribas is a leading European bank. We're operating globally. Here in Asia, we are present in 13 territories, and we've got a very diverse client base, local and international clients, financial institutions, private bank clients, and of course as well corporates with their supply chain here in this part of the world. So my role is basically to help with the coordination, the implementation of our sustainability strategy in the region, and it entails working with our various business lines, including transaction banking and supply chain financing teams, to integrate sustainability and ESG in the way we engage with clients, and the way we basically integrate it in our decision-making process and in the structuring of our solutions and products we offer to clients in order to support them in their efforts of decarbonization and help them in achieving their sustainable targets. So AI in this context for us is a tool basically enabling us to do more, to do better, and to do faster.
Well, thank you, Sabrina. We wait to hear more details with you later on. Edmund, you are from the startup perspective, right? Thank you. Please introduce yourself and your position on the topic.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Edmund. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Doxa. We do have platforms called Doxa Connects. Doxa Connects automate procurement workflows, especially like we streamline the whole entire workflows in the construction industries. So in this angle, what we want to do is to bring the whole value chain to the ecosystem. Like example, today your project owners, your main contractors, your subcontractors, and downstream. Then we build financing towards the whole ecosystem. That's what we are looking at. To summarize two areas about AI or supply chain financing, two statements. How digitalization today unlock better financing tomorrow. That's what we are looking at to make sure that digitalizations with good data flows coming in, this eventually helped data for financing as a data-driven platforms. Second part to it is simplifying embodied carbon calculation through digital procurements. So how there is so much use case about what we want to calculate, but how to do it. Is there a way, how can we simplify it? So that's the kind of angles that we are looking at. Yeah,
how long have your company been around?
Yeah, coming about 6 years.
6 years, wonderful. You've been visionary in creating the company. Huh?
Yeah,
We'd love to hear from you more later on. David, you are from another big bank, right? Yes, tell us.
Hi, I'm David Kyo. I'm the co-head of transaction banking for Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation. We're an international bank with Japanese roots. We are one of the few Asian banks, actually, that are GFANZ aligned. So we have a very strong commitment for net zero, for our Scope 1, Scope 2 by 2030, and then Scope 3 by 2050. which means that anything and everything that touches our balance sheet, including things that we do under asset management, we want to be net zero by 2050. This is vitally important because then who we bank and how we bank them becomes vitally important. As SMBC, we've been on the forefront of green financing for quite a few years now. We've seen the evolution from the bond and capital markets, the loan markets, and now from my position in cash management and trade finance, how do we take this into working capital? How do we really bring about the ability to green the value chain? Because there's so many industries where we're seeing adoption by the biggest companies, right, at a scope 1 and 2 level. To really make the difference is when we go further down into the value chain, where you have a lot of smaller companies that will perhaps find different challenges. Perhaps it's capital, maybe it's the cost of funding, or even access to funding, right? You look at the different industries where there's so much international involvement in terms of the footprint. And I think AI now, and the technology that exists, there's an opportunity here for us to really galvanize how we can bring about the greening of the entire value chain and make a real difference in the carbon footprint of everything that we touch and we drive, the things we live in. And I hope we can find a way to collaborate, right, to make this happen.
Thank you, David. I want to share 2 little secrets about Sumitomo, right? Because I met them 6 months ago. First thing, if you observe on the pin of his jacket, how many of you can see what is that? Can you show it to them?
The UN SDG.
The United Nations SDG, right? How many know what is United Nations SDG? Wonderful. And from the way he carried himself, I feel that Sumitomo is a company who really care about the United Nations SDG. Second, I met with one of your colleagues 6 months ago in the workshop. He says Sumitomo has a lot of money, want to invest in this space. So there's actually a lot of money behind it as well. I just want to let you know, this is what I have learned. Right? Again, the little secret I know, right? So, okay, this topic actually is a very complex topic because I talked to several people. It's about AI, complicated enough, right? I spent 38 years on it. Then it's about supply chain, also very complicated. Finance is also a very complicated thing, but sustainability, 4 different cross-domain, incredibly complicated. So I'm here to learn, right? So I think before we can discuss solution, right, I think we need to define what it is. Because if we don't define what it is, we don't have a common understanding what it is, how to discuss, right, and have a debate, right? So Sabrina, just give us your understanding. It can be different, okay? Your understanding of harnessing AI for sustainable supply chain finance.
Okay.
What is your definition? In simple terms, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that the definition for sustainable supply chain finance would be how we basically integrate ESG, how we integrate sustainability consideration into the financial instruments, the solutions that we're offering to our clients in order to promote sustainable practices across their supply chain. So meaning going beyond the client itself, but try to incentivize the suppliers in the supply chain to adopt more sustainable practices.
So it's beyond scope 1, scope 2, going into the scope
3, exactly.
Which is very complicated because there are so many suppliers, right? You can't really control all the behavior also, right?
Yeah, actually it wouldn't do it's a bit simplistic presenting it like this, right? Yeah. Because it doesn't do justice to all my colleagues, and I'm sure David's team working on transaction banking, because there is I think the origination cycle for sustainable supply chain financing program is 2 years.
Okay.
So indeed, it means understanding the supply chain, being able to do this ESG assessment, identifying the hotspot, meaning, in the supply chain, if I look at scope 3 emission, where is it coming from? Where do I need to basically target my efforts? And this is already kind of a huge amount of data and information that I need to collect, that I need to process and analyze, right?
Yep.
That's where harnessing AI is important. That's the first point, is understanding, and then engaging, and then only at the end of this process you've got the financial instrument that's going to help basically deploy and channel capital where you want to.
thanks for validating my understanding. Because when MAS organized this panel, they gave me this title. I was looking at it, I was thinking really hard. This is a very hard problem because you need to use AI to navigate the entire supply chain, which can be multiple level. Then you need to understand it, track it, measure it, and use it to estimate financing. Wow, Daniel, you're giving us a really hard problem. So you two under a lot of pressure right now to deliver, right? Now, so it's your definition. Okay, let me try David first, okay? Before we come for the solution provider, right? So David, what is your understanding from the Sumitomo Mitsui perspective?
I would say first and foremost, right, when you say the pressure, I think in this sense, right, I think pressure is a privilege. It's a famous saying out there by anybody who knows tennis, Martina Navratilova. Pressure is a privilege. I mean, the fact that we have this opportunity to make a real difference, you know, in my mind, right, the way AI can be deployed at this point in time, there's so many data points, there's so much pressure on banks, and again, good pressure, right, to provide green financing. The thing I think we need to solve for, though, is finance for the sake of finance, which don't actually lead to a more sustainable outcome over time, then we're not making the difference. A lot of bank financing, as Sabrina touched on, right, whether I give you you know, a working capital facility like a trade facility that's due to be renewed every year under annual review, or I give you a 3-year loan, a 5-year loan. Now, if I stick in some of the, you know, KPIs around what you need to achieve to say that, you know, this is a qualified green finance, and you say, oh, I'll reduce my GHG emissions by X, right? But at the end of the facility, when we're renewing it for another cycle, your GHG emissions, right, if you don't start again at your new lower GHG level and continue to push, right, and improve, but you hit a reset, and then you think, yeah, you know, here we go. You know, we just make sure we come full cycle and you don't actually invest to continue to lower your GHG emissions, then we've solved for nothing. The biggest thing right now for supply chain, though, is you imagine the construction of another massive facility like this, right? If we're adopting the same technologies, we're buying the same type of steel from the same steel manufacturers, and the embodied carbon in all this steel, and nothing has changed, then what are we solving for? How can we use banks and deploy better financing solutions that if there is a steel manufacturer out there that says, I can provide this quality steel, but with half the embodied carbon. Perhaps it starts with the iron ore miner, right? He has greened his entire value chain, and there's one such mining company in Australia, right? From the equipment they use to dig up the iron ore, to the train they use to deliver the iron ore to the port, and the vessels they use to transport the iron ore to the steel manufacturing facilities. So if in Singapore, 70% of our steel comes from China. So if this iron ore went to China, now then it matters which steel manufacturing facility manufactured the steel. Did they have access to renewable energy? Did they have different processes? They use arc technology, right? Or are they using the same old coal-fired power plant, you know, to manufacture that steel, and nothing has changed, right? But what we want to do is, how do we harness the international network that we have as a bank, right? We're willing to partner with people, right? If there's a steel manufacturer out there amongst you, you know somebody, family, friend, business contact, that can say, we can deliver this steel at 50% the embodied carbon, please, we got to talk, right? Because I want to enable you. And then this becomes a massive step change. The same can be applied for glass, concrete, cement, you name it, right? So many things. There's a complexity around this value chain. We've seen the auto sector make huge gains in recent times, not just the technology from an ICE into EV, but the materials they use to make the car. How they deliver the cars, and you have access to the cars. I'm going to stop because I carry on all day, but I hope you get the idea.
I just want a quick question for my understanding.
AI is very powerful.
You do not just provide money or financing, you also provide other resources to make it happen for your client.
We are absolutely making all sorts of
Okay, good.
advisory services.
I love to hear from the two banks. This is very, same thing as well, right? Before I get to Edmund on the solution, I personally felt this is a very hard problem, especially scope one, make sure you can behave yourself, make sure, then the second thing is your family, then you need to make sure all your friends are all kind of compliant, right? I feel that is really very hard. Now I want to ask the audience, how many of you think is very easy? Please raise your hand. Nobody thinks so. How many think is really, 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 really hard that you need Elon Musk to come and solve the problem? Only one guy. Wow, you guys are very optimistic. How many of you think that is solvable?
It's going to be solvable.
Yeah, solvable.
Got to work together, it is solvable.
So there are a lot of use cases, right? Okay. Now, Edmund, you are the technology solution data provider, right? You are supposed to help the two banks as a resource to support all the company. Your perspective on this? Your definition?
Yeah, I think the banks, they have money to finance, right? But what they need is data. So we need to, and as mentioned by Sabrina, that origination of data. So what are the origination of data that we can push to the bank? So as a platform provider like us, we start from the originations. Then another angle that you can look at is, because we are talking about embodied carbon calculations, is scope 3, which means as a procurement platforms, if you don't buy things, you don't have to calculate. But if you calculate, definitely is some things that we need to know how the data that been calculated is good enough for the banks. Another angle that we are trying to provide is the, as mentioned by David, that the company is doing core or steel. Their job is still core and steel. But today, you ask them to do calculation of the ESG. Actually, they out of their day-to-day job scope. Imagine you go to any of the industries, then they have to go and do the calculation of that scope 3. So how are we going to provide the problem statements and solve the problems to those suppliers as an ecosystem, the kind of things where earlier I mentioned about simplifying embodied carbon calculation through digital procurements? How can we help them to actually to look into simple calculation without affecting their day-to-day operations and stuff?
So you make it more efficient.
Yes.
But I do have a very tough technical question for you because I'm a technologist. How do you track and build the network of all the supplier? That is really very hard. Even like Walmart has a big supplier, right? I'm sure Amazon. That is a really hard problem. Any secret you can share a little bit without giving away too much? Enough for them to come talk to you after the session for business.
This is a good question for me to answer. We start with the anchor first. So example, right? Although we are sector agnostic, like we have healthcare, we have shipbuilders, we have majority of clients are in the construction space.
Construction space,
Yeah.
which is the biggest emission industry, right?
Right. So we have a landowner, right? So we start with main contractors, because the main contractors work with so many of subcontractors and the suppliers. So we work with the main con first, then we bring their suppliers and subcontractors to the platforms. So we chain the first most heavy lifting and digitalize the whole process. The origination of the approval metrics, your contracts, your claims, your invoices, all these documents has been digitalized. Then we want to flip the subcon or the suppliers become a buyer, and they start to onboard their suppliers to the same ecosystem.
So layer by layer.
So we start to chain.
So maybe the bank has a lot of power to help you to connect them. Also the customer, right? That they serve, right? Okay, very good. Okay. In fact, I saw some question coming in already. Amazingly, the question are exactly my similar question I'm asking for. Get ready, yeah? We have to be very efficient in the answer, right? I think the first question is, among the ESG, there are so many objectives, right? Basically, so many of them. Just give me, in your context, the number one priority. Which KPI in your banking experience, which can be different, right, in your different contexts, right? What will be the one that you guys get the most hit, basically? Sabrina? for your bank, huh? Basically.
Yes. Well, I think that the focus, most of the focus so far has been on carbon and carbon emission reduction. I mean, David's been mentioning net zero. I think we have a number of banks have already made this commitment, and we're in the implementation phase, and it means indeed tackling carbon emission, reducing all scope.
This is your number one. Huh? Carbon emission is your number one. So that is the KPI that have been prioritized. This is the question. So David, for you?
I think the right answer, for me anyway, right, it comes with the counterparty. When a client that you have means well, right, they sincerely want to do better. And I have a very, this is a couple of years ago, but one of my favorite deals ever done, there were 5 KPIs that were set, 4 of which were very much, sustainability, environmentally focused around GHG, water, and the like. And you don't want to have to separate this and say, this is the number one. Because if the client's willing to commit, right, then you really want to be on this journey with them, because then there are ways that they're improving in multiple levels, right? Because then that one last one in particular, for whatever reason, and this is a few years ago, when they wanted to make a commitment to worker safety.
Worker safety.
Yeah, so there's social element to this. This is a real estate, company. They had a portfolio of up to 12 rather large developments. They put under one facility, and they put this wraparound of 5 KPIs, how they want to improve, right? Everything from power, GHG emissions, power usage, water. Then there was food waste, and then worker safety.
I see.
So there's so much, like the hotels that run buffets, the restaurants. And here's a company that's going to be adopting different technology to measure food waste. I'm like, yeah, I'm all for this.
Okay.
So elements of this, everything matters, right? Because end of the day, right?
So you had to find a balance, right? Of fulfilling one stone, 4 birds or something like that, right? Along that way, right? Okay. I won't get to Edmund because the next question is going to be tougher. I know it's coming. They are all coming. The next question is that what kind, exactly any KPI based on your fulfilling so many customers in terms of ESG that you think is number one priority? Or the highest demand in your case, right?
Yeah.
What kind of data they're looking for?
Right. I think you can't expect all the manufacturer or the suppliers to submit their EPD, and it's so tough. And how can you make sure that the data that output is reliable? So, we have all the data and everybody, and also if you expect a lot of declarations coming in, it takes very long time. As mentioned by a lot of people, it's tough. So the kind of angles where we look at is how can AI, in terms of the LLM model, that we can actually harness data and collate enough libraries and output data enough to, rather than, today in the embodied carbon calculation, we are looking at rather than spend-based, but towards the activity-based, the kind of angles where, we want to lower down the deviation as well, right?
Yeah, maybe I clarify the question. The question is more like, if you serve, let's say you serve 100 customers, right? So far, which KPI in terms of ESG they tends to focus on in the scope of your business?
Right. I think for us, as mentioned, construction itself is how you construct, how much carbon footprint you have.
Still that part, because of the nature of your business.
Yeah.
Okay, the next set of questions, I can see the pattern, right? There are 3 questions, all asking for very specific best case use of AI to solve that problem. I want you to think through and get ready, because all 3 questions are all related to that. Now we have a bunch of questions coming in. So just give me some example of use case in your real practice that solve that problem. Yeah, AI, how AI and what you have financed so far.
So what we've seen in terms of use case, I would say there is 2 key angles. The first one would be how we use basically ESG synthetic assessment. I was mentioning, this requirement to basically have a proper assessment of the supply chain, and the fact that we are challenging, it's very challenging because of the lack of data, the lack of accuracy, reliability on data, and basically AI models can help us to make the synthetic assessment to try to identify again, if I look at carbon emission, where in the supply chain I need to target my efforts. So within the bank, we've developed an AI model to do that, and we're looking at it from different businesses, for instance. So our asset management arm will basically use this model to assess the carbon emissions of the companies in their portfolio and adjust the ESG rating. In transaction banking, we will use that to make an assessment, a benchmarking of the client, and to use it to engage our clients and basically to have a more productive, fruitful discussion with them. So this is one of the use cases where AI is very important, because basically it makes us save a lot of time and efforts to have basically an estimation that can be accurate of carbon emission.
So it's like using AI for discovery, is that right? To discover where are the opportunity, where you human may not be possible to do so. I see.
Yes, because too many data points.
Too much data points.
Exactly.
So discovery, it's a little bit like AI for science, for discovering drugs, but you're discovering opportunity for sustainability in the supply chain.
Exactly.
Okay, there I learned something. Edmund, your space? Anything that you felt AI is really, because you're also a supplier to the bank, right?
Right.
Your solution. What do you use AI for?
Yeah, I was thinking, our angle is look at the SLL, in terms of sustainability-linked loans that today is very good group level, right? So how are we going to look at project SLL? And why does AI in the picture, can we look at the global data and benchmark against some of the SPT frameworks? So with the SPT frameworks, then we can look into, then we start to measure. Yeah. One part of it is to look at the benchmarking. I think we're looking at that. The other part is about, the accounting part. If greenwashing, we need to make sure that actually we don't double accounts and stuff, right? Then we chain up, from a buyers to seller become a buyer, then after seller and all this thing, right? Actually, there is somehow rather, if you don't cautious about the whole thing, you may have double accounting when you upstream, right?
So you're talking about credibility, accuracy, and trustworthiness using AI in your part of the world, which will help the bank as well.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, good. David?
Well, two parts to this.
You have two solutions.
Yeah. Well, first one for our own internal purposes. Our transaction banking team works very closely what we have in the bank called AIII, Asia Innovation Center. We are using AI to develop something we call CFO dashboards. So
CFO dashboard, okay.
Yeah, so for our most important clients that, just using AI models to help them get a better grasp of all their businesses, and especially when they're projecting into the future and what they're trying to do. So what are the data points that are of greatest importance to them? How do we build a CFO dashboard for them? The second thing, actually, I have to mention this because it's a collaboration, right? As SMBC, we've been with MAS from day one for Project Nova, and we really want to see how Project Nova will use AI ultimately. Like I said earlier, with green finance, are we really making a difference? Right? Are we really making, the loans and the lending that we put out there? Are we really creating a greener future? But very importantly as well, right? How can we use AI to call out the bad actors, to combat greenwashing? There is a challenge out there sometimes, right, in different parts of the world where greenwashing is real. And we need to weed that stuff out because the bad actors will only serve to undermine all the good things that many of us are trying to do.
I see. Okay, good. I think we covered some use case. I don't think it's possible to answer so many questions, but I want to shift the remaining 5 minutes into an interesting subject, because I think we look at harnessing AI for sustainable supply chain finance, about money, supply chain, we need to cover the human part of things, right? I think one of the questions that was here asking is about if you use AI, AI has hallucination in large language model, right? There's a lot of risk in using AI itself. If the tool itself is not reliable, and you could hurt a lot of people, right? So, just again, personal perspective as you are implementing it. I'm sure you also use it yourself, like ChatGPT, right? So I just want to hear from your personal point of view on this topic. Because when you're implementing this using AI, if AI is not reliable, it can create a lot of cascading effect in your financing decision as well. Sabrina, you want to try that?
Yeah, so the point is that, as you were mentioning it, AI is a tool, is an enabler, and I think that it should be kind of designed with a human-centric focus. Like, it's AI is optimal only when it's complemented by human skills, by human insight, and with kind of a strategic view and planning.
Okay.
So it's really kind of trying to find the balance between technology and people. And having this view, of course, then there is an extent of having to ensure transparency, fairness, and accountability in the way in the AI application that we're using in sustainable finance supply chain.
So, interesting question. If you use a model, you develop an AI, you make some decision, right, on financing. Do you have a human-in-the-loop process where maybe your model is not accurate or biased or something like that?
I think the point is that what we try to do with our model is also kind of have feedback loop and trying to confront it to basically real-world kind of feedback and data.
Okay.
So we've been doing that actually as an example with a project and a pilot with collaboration with a client.
Okay.
Where basically we set up as part of the sustainable supply chain program. We had a collaboration with CDP in order to incentivize suppliers to provide and help the corporate to get primary data on climate.
Okay.
And with that, we collected data which helped us to basically face a number of challenges.
Sure.
The data gap, being able to raise awareness within the client and the suppliers, being able to have preferential financing conditions for the suppliers for them to be able to basically invest in their transformation. And we also compared this data with our model. And I think that's a way also to be able to get some feedback.
Multiple source of information. Okay.
Exactly.
How about David in your bank?
We have a lot of guardrails, and then every time we look at adopting AI more, we make sure that there's as Sabrina said, a very human-centric approach to this.
Okay.
And I can safely say the bank will not ever, let me rephrase that, at this point in time, there's no decision to be made within the bank that it's been passed on to the AI.
Sure.
Right? A decision always will rest with a human being. We use AI as an enabler, more sources of data, more sources of, information perhaps. But yeah, I know we do not see the decision-making responsibility to AI.
Okay, good. At least I hear from the two banks you are doing that right now. How about you, Edmund? How is you're providing the data, you're at the API or whatever, right?
Yep.
And how do you put the human factor part of it?
I think both Sabrina and David answered the questions on that. And, we can't just depend on AI. And but there are tons of libraries and data floating around. And how do you leverage on AI as a tool? And thereafter, you certify it, or you have get primary data. You make sure that you can actually compare it. All this. So it's a mixture of tools and yeah.
Wonderful. We actually run out of time, so I'd like to each one of you to have a last statement for the audience. Sabrina, one takeaway, simple statement, yeah.
Well, I think that it's not specific to AI or to supply chain financing, but as we mentioned it, we see that collaboration is absolutely key. And we're collaborating with other banks, with a lot of green tech, with ESG firms. So I think that's really the point. Like in trying to advance the sustainability agenda, we cannot do everything ourselves. Connections and collaboration is absolutely
So the human
key.
collaboration is
Exactly.
important. The United Nations SDG number 17 partnership, right?
AI is the supporting.
Is supporting too. How about you, David? I'm just curious.
Yeah, look, stay positive. I think we can all still make a difference, right? The big thing, I think, from a AI perspective, I mean, the technology is there. It's about adoption. Do not wait for that perfect solution, because this thing will only get better and better. But every day, you know, it's a good day to start something different, right? If it generates a better outcome in the future. And I look forward to collaborating with more people.
Oh, very positive. Try it out and then deal with the problem. Edmund?
I think sustainability is for everyone, and we have to start now. And I mean, we have goal, and definitely I think the partnership itself and towards the partnership, then it will able to help, you know, to look into adoptions and to, you know, to kickstart with the flows. If not, 2030, 2050 is quite short.
I see. Wonderful. Thanks a lot for all your time. Actually, it's the new domain for me. I learned a lot from your conversation, right? I do want to leave one thing to take away. As I mentioned at the opening, today is a US election. $15 billion are being spent with 10,000 organizations to support the decisions that have major impact across the world. While we are looking to harness AI for sustainability, for supply chain financing, I think we need to also spend some time the reverse. What we can do to make AI better for our future so that we are sustainable. Because it's going to affect a lot of the human decision, especially in election like that. So it's not using one way, also go back and do something for AI. In short form, don't ask what AI can do for you to make more money, ask what you can do to make AI better as well. I think that is a global responsibility. Thank you very much. Please help me to give them a hand of applause. Thank you.